This is another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. My lesson is titled Swarthy Savages Converted. I'm going to be reading a little bit today from a history book I've got here, and it was pointing out something interesting to me about the coming of the European to the Americas. And I've, like many other people, heard others teach on this before about the Europeans coming and colonizing America and finding the indigenous people here, the black people, and you hear about the black Indian, whereas today it's changed. Now we're no longer called Indian and so on. But I never read it for myself. I thought it was very interesting. Of course I believed it, and I saw in some cases too picture drawings of the people and so on, and of course I believed that it was too strong in the presentation and the sources they gave and so on, and the drawings of Columbus and so on, of the indigenous or the original people that he found here in the Americas, who were called Indian or Endas, meaning God's people, and he called them Indian and drew their pictures, and they were called Indian and they were Negroes. But later on, we know as time went on, you got the $5 Indian, where the Europeans were paid to register as Indians. But here, reading it actually for myself, and I've got a couple books to show some of these early black peoples here that were in the Americas. Today I'm going to be reading from one of them because something stood out to me in all this history about the coming of Christianity, which Christianity is an Abrahamic religion, and you know that I've been looking into the whole issue of the Bible lately, how much of the Bible or the Torah is believable. I'm having a bit of a trouble with it, and the more I look into it, the more problems I'm finding. Now, before I get into reading from this book, the apocryphal teachings that I heard of some time ago, actually some other history I heard some time ago had said, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, had said that the Israelites, when they were holed up at Masada in Jericho by the Romans, and they committed suicide to not let the Romans capture them because they were running out of food and necessities. But some of them prior to that had fled and ended up coming to North America. I don't know what sources there are, because the person at the time in the video didn't give sources for that, but I've got the recording. One day I'll come across it again. Maybe they did give the sources. At the time I didn't care about sources. The gripping of the story just grabbed me so much, that they came over here to North America, to the US and Canada. But whether that's correct or not, that was in the video at the time. But I've heard different Hebrew camps teach that in the Apocrypha, and I don't remember where it is now, but in the Apocrypha, the Israelites were shown to have revolted against the Assyrians, I guess, or they just took it upon themselves to escape, and they came over to America. And so the teaching was that some of the Israelites came over to the Americas. So we're looking at a long time ago, right? Like that's probably close to, 2,500 years ago. So that's clearly before the time of Christ. But here it is. I'm trying to show here that coming upon this information here about Christianity coming with the Europeans to Christ, my argument that I made on a number of videos recently, that if the Israelites fled from the Romans in AD 70, they fled into different parts of Africa, the Romans could go on with their early church fathers and bishops to spread Christianity all over Europe and Middle East, different places they went. And now I'm going to show here that they were spreading Christianity in the Americas. Why is it that the Israelites, who their God sent their his son Jesus to die on Calvary, and they were now empowered by the Spirit on the day of Pentecost when the Spirit fell, and the church grew by 3,000 immediately. Why is it that they could not duplicate that like the Europeans did and spread the message of Christ in different parts of Africa? In fact, I find that it was the Christian movement out of the Europeans and out of the Romans that actually spread Christianity in different parts of Africa, even up until like the 16th and 17th century and going on in Uganda and other places like that. Like I've made the videos about that kind of stuff. And Christianity is spread to these people by the Europeans. But the Africans didn't get Christianity spread by the black Hebrews, who are the Hebrews based on the description in Scripture. Africa didn't get Christianity spread to them by the Hebrews who fled in AD 70. So I'm wondering, what is the problem with the Israelites spreading their Jesus, if their God actually sent Jesus to die for the two kingdoms to be reunited and for their deliverance to come at Calvary? I just don't get it, why these Israelites are so lazy, but the Europeans or the Romans can spread the message of the Jesus or of the God of the Hebrews, since they say that Jesus is God. The Europeans are spreading the message of the God of the Hebrews, but the Hebrews don't care to spread it in Africa where they fled. So here again, now this book is showing, I was glad to get my hands on this. This is actually, I've been doing a lot of reading. I guess from the stuff I've been saying in my videos lately, you can tell that that I've been doing some reading, so I'm growing, but I still consider myself a real novice with history, because I didn't care about it all these years sitting in the Christian church. But I've been reading a lot and coming across different stuff. I've got lots of books. Excuse me, I've got lots of books, more than I can read right now. And lately I've been coming up on some older books. This book I've got here, about $250 on abebook.com, my most expensive book ever, although that's small price to some of you. But I got this one for $100 at a used bookstore. I was glad when I saw it. I was just trying to buy a couple books, older books themselves, but there were some I was selling them for like $4 and $5. So I was buying a couple of those. When I saw this one they're like $250, where you can get this for $100. I'm like, so I bought the book. It's by an American historian, Henry Howard Brownell. The New World, volumes 1 and 2, North and South America, from 1856. And I wasn't reading it much, just a little bit, but I've started reading it again. And so I just want to share some stuff on this here today. Now, he was basically saying in his opening of the book that in writing this history book of the Americas, North and South America, actually, that he's writing with a lot of information from facts that were gathered at the time, and from facts that were known at the time, and facts from manuscripts at the time. And we're going back to like 1,000 years before, because he's saying that he's saying that the history is showing that Europeans were actually, they came to the Americas in North and South America about 5 centuries before Columbus. And I didn't know that. I thought it was just with the time of Columbus that you heard about the Europeans in North and South America. I'd always heard of the other parts of America, Central and whatever. But he's saying about 5 whole centuries before. And the interesting thing is that as I read it, I get to understand that these early natives and aboriginals, which I just used to call originals, It's like he didn't quite want to spell it out at first, but as I get into the book some more, it's turning out to me that these natives were black, these originals, they were Indian, and they're looking more swarthy, as he even used the word swarthy, and black. And as it gets into the book, you can clearly tell that these were the people, right? Like a Negro people was here first, and from other readings that I've done and other videos that I've watched as well of different people in the Israelite community, plus in the Kemet community, you get to understand that even the Egyptians were over this side of the world from so long ago, right? So you're getting Cushite Egyptian type people like Negroes being over here from thousands of years ago, and then you hear of the Washita and so on. Like so, I understand what time it is. And actually, at the time when I bought this, I got another book from Ancient Stuff with Mexico, which I'm not going to read from today, that are describing these people. They're black, they're Negro, and that old Mexican kingdom. And he mentioned Mexico and Peru here, and they were black, and they showed pictures of the drawings of these black people. So it's the first time for me as an eye-opener that I'm actually, instead of just learning of it from other people and seeing them post up the screenshots of the books and the wordings in the books and the pictures that they show, that I'm actually coming up on these in writings myself by now, owning the books for myself with the writings and actually with pictures as well. Now this book, this one, there's most of the writing. It's got a few drawings and pictures here, but but the other one seems to have a little bit more pictures, so I'm going to get into these in future times. But I was really glad to come across these books. Now the interesting thing is that he seems to start the history of the Europeans, like I said, about 500 years before Columbus, so it's going on somewhere around about 1000 AD, somewhere around there. The earliest date so far he mentioned in the book is 985. But he talks about how when these Europeans were on their ships and they're coming, they're looking for land, basically. And the description that actually comes into my mind, but I'm not saying it's correct here, it's just what comes into my mind, causes a little bit of trouble for me, because they tell us that the flood of Noah destroyed the whole world, and that's what you see in the scriptures. But when I look at what some other people are saying, and I remember Seti, which is Sarasut and Seti, pardon me for quoting all these big names, because I'm just starting to study these stuff, but I'm showing you that I'm considering things from people who are well known to discuss these issues. And lately I've been looking into the work of Africa by the late Dr. Joseph Ben Yochanan, and I'm looking into some of these other Afrocentric writers as well, and I'm having trouble sizing up the Bible properly in a Hebrew or Abrahamic type religious kind of way, where the Bible is just the way it is, it's just true the way it is. I'm having trouble, but I must say it's not primarily because of these people, like you get like the Ashwan Kwesi, Professor James Smalls, and these are the different names, and the people in the Kemetic area and so on that Israelites are known to fight with. But my primary reason for questioning the Bible is not from a black view or an African kind of view, although now I will officially begin to investigate the Bible from an African point of view. But my real reason for starting to question the Torah the way it is seeing the sacrificial system in the scriptures not making sense. So I'm wondering, how can God go along with the sacrificial system of slaying animals for the removal of your sins? That did it for me, and that changed my view of the Torah. And then I started to just look into these other different issues. And the Bible drove me to study black history. Now the Bible is driving me to study African history. The Bible is driving me to study the history of the Bible, or the history of the Torah itself. And I already made the video for you some time ago, maybe 10 or so videos ago, saying the Bible is anti-Bible, because there are problems there with it. I'm not saying nothing in the Bible is true. Obviously, I believe the scriptures, but I cannot believe all of it anymore. I refuse to. God has to come and tell me. And I'm now preparing my lesson, which I've mentioned a few times, titled, what did I call it again? I haven't done the video yet. I should do it today, but I probably won't bother because I'm kind of tired. Late last night and got home, couldn't sleep. something about God has to speak to you. Basically, God has to tell me that this Bible is true the way it's written, the Torah, even from the ancient Hebrew. Because I don't even believe this ancient Paleo Hebrew anyway. This is, for me, that is garbage. I've already uncovered enough little measly information at my little measly level for me to believe that Paleo Hebrew couldn't even be the original language. And the scriptures does say the language of the Hebrews. Or you might see it written as a language of the Jews. And I think the reason why it's doing that is because the Bible or the Torah doesn't walk straight, because somebody who put that stuff together is hiding information from you. There are other languages that are far more powerful than Hebrew, that can describe stuff far better, far more powerful. And so I'm going to talk about that in the future too. But I already told you already that I got a problem with the Hebrew. But anyway, now from this now he's saying that when the Europeans came on their ships when they saw a spot that they could land in different parts of America, and they eventually came to Canada as well. I'm in Canada myself. But when they came in the parts of North America, and he mentions Boston, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and so on and so far, a few other places too. But when they saw these natives, the real owners, so according to what this guy is saying here, he came upon these black people who are being shown as the Negro and Swarthy and so on. And it says that when the Europeans came off the boat and they saw this nice food, the grapes, and I remember the grapes that is said when they found Canaan, I don't know, I can't make a proper connection there, but they found lots of grapes and nice natural food from the trees and so on, and they moved on elsewhere and so on, and then eventually they just came off the ship. You're checking different areas, right? And they saw the natives there, and they called them savages and just killed them immediately. Nothing like, hey, can you show us, your culture and show us a land, and we want to live here because we're looking for land. We live in an ice box or wherever we come from, or things are down and out, and we're looking to expand or whatever. Can we settle on the land here and we'll live peaceful with you and nice and so on? And like they would take like 100 or 200 years to learn from the people, the natives, and live peacefully with them. No, they came off the ship, grabbing some grapes and fruit, whatever they found, coconuts or whatever, and then they saw the people and they just killed them and jumped back on the boat, apparently. Now, the natives now, of course, didn't take too kindly to getting killed. Some of their people getting killed, their family members, like mercilessly. You just see them and kill them. And that's why I wonder, when I was talking about the Noah's flood, is because what came to my mind, and I can't make any proper connection because I don't know, and it's going to sound offensive to people, but what came to my mind immediately after hearing people like Sarasut and Seti talking about what worldwide flood, because Egyptian empire was going on with this dynasties, with its pharaohs unbroken in an unbroken line. So that's stuff I got to learn about and look into during the time set to be Noah's flood. But it said that prior to Noah's flood, with the Cain and Abel situation, that Cain just rose up and slew his brother. He just looked at his brother and just killed him. Okay, restarting the recording. So this is the second part of Swarthy Savages Converted, because the recorder cut off, so I just have to jump back in from where I think I might have been. So I was saying that, if it caught on the first part, I was saying that what came to mind was Cain killing his brother, and there might not be a connection there, but my mind just did it. That's just how your mind works. I didn't make my mind. The Creator made our minds. And so my mind just took me right back to Cain, just rose up and killed his brother just like that. And so I was reminded of this because these Europeans came off the boat and saw the natives and just looked at them and just killed them. Just like that. They didn't do them anything, they just killed them and called them savages. Now, the natives there decided, well, we don't want our family members to just continue being killed like this, so they decided to retaliate and they grouped themselves up and came after the Europeans and killed back some of the Europeans who called them savages for no reason and killed them for no reason. So they killed back some of the Europeans. Europeans just launched back at them and called them savages again and just killed more of them. Because I guess they had better weapons and so on. More powerful weapons, probably guns and whatever they had. And just kill them and just continue from that point to call them savages. Now, I'd heard of all this stuff before from many people. I never read it for myself. And I was just in shock when I saw these things. That they actually called them savages and decided that they needed to be killed and actually killed them. And so my mind just connected back to Cain. And so I have to now look into the whole story of Cain to see if Cain was really destroyed, if this was a worldwide flood. Because this is really odd. But he says now that as they go on searching, all over, that they found more and more of these people. And look at what happened here now in relation to this series with the name, sorry, not with the name, with the New Testament is Fake series. I'm going to read here now about from page, let me see if it's page 21 or 23. Okay, so here's this part here now, from page 21 in this book. During the summer of 1004, and that's AD, Thorvald with a part of his crew passed around Cape Cod to the northward in quest of fresh discoveries. Jump through a little bit more. Thence sailing west, he soon made land somewhere, it would seem not far from Boston. The Northmen landed on a pleasant promontory and, meeting with several of the Skraelings or natives, killed them. They just met them and just killed them. To revenge this injury, the savages soon gathered in great numbers and fiercely attacked the intruders. So the people who were just normally living here considered them intruders for obvious reason. They were not living here. They were just intruders. Thorvald was mortally wounded by an arrow and so on. So you see, then it goes on to just let you know that they charged back at the natives and killed them. Now, if you look here now on page 23, these people who could just look at the natives and just kill them are bringing an Abrahamic religion called Christianity, the message of Christ. This is the Hebrew Christ that we read of in the New Testament, who Hebrews are teaching was prophesied by people like Isaiah and so on to come to die for our sins. So the result of these supposed prophecies by the great prophets like Isaiah and others and Daniel has come to pass in this Christ coming. And now the Europeans are spreading the message of the Christ prophesied by people like Isaiah. They first killed the natives, and then whoever survived, they spread the message of this Hebrew Christ to the people. Religion seems to be such a strange thing, because you can come and just kill my people, and then I'm going to just accept your God and love him. That is really odd. And these people don't seem to have anything in them to say, I just killed their people, their family members and so on, and their fathers of these wives and children for no reason. And now I'm going to teach them about loving the love of Jesus, how Jesus loves them and died for them. Like, what makes the natives just be so gone in their minds where you can see that happen, and then you just fall down and accept and worship this Jesus and get baptized and all that. Like, religion is just straight up witchcraft. It really is. No wonder I'm researching this Bible now. I'm rereading the Bible. I'm going to have to just set up a website now, rethinking the Bible. Because I just don't understand how you can just go and kill the people and then they just bow down and worship your God and love Him and start singing the songs that you're making. Like the guy they said that wrote Amazing Grace, the song Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. They said that he wrote that, and he was the son of a minister. I guess he was a minister as well. His father was a pastor, and they're in the slave trade business, right? The North Atlantic slave trade, and he's transporting slaves as well. And I guess it gripped him while at sea on the slave ship, while he's carrying Negroes to their death in slavery and their bondage in slavery and so on. It gripped him what he was doing to the Negroes that he was transporting and how they were being treated and whatever. And it gripped him, and he's like, man, I'm a Christian, I really shouldn't be doing this. But he's not going to stop. But instead of doing the stopping, he rather do something else, which was write a song for more people to worship God through the song. The song was Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me, because he knew what he was doing was wretched. But he didn't stop. Because worshiping God or worshiping Jesus doesn't have to stop you from doing wretched things and being wretched unto other humans on the earth. You just have to do it. And Jesus empowered him, because Jesus was his strength as he prayed daily for strength to go through another day of doing these things. They just did it. Like it's religion. Now, on page 23, apparently these natives, they don't seem to, maybe you've uncovered more information than I hear of the Decalogue stone and so on. I find that really strange that it became so famous. Sometimes I just wonder if they're planting these things, and some of these scrolls, if they're writing these, in not so ancient times and telling you that they're more ancient, so that they can say this is a real ancient Paleo-Hebrew scroll that we found to verify the Torah. Because you look at the Decalogue stone, for instance, and it could have really been there for a very, very long time, or maybe placed there in more modern times. I don't know, just all guesses here, right? But sometimes I wonder how many of these artifacts that they found are really, that are proving the lie of religion. Because it seems like the Europeans are finding these Hebrew artifacts. But now that I'm starting to read, I'm seeing that the real natives didn't seem to be so concerned with this Hebrew knowledge. And it's not like I'm trying to hang myself by saying that, because surely as I read, I'm going to see, and I know there's other books and so on talking about the Hebrews, but lately I've been going back and reading some of these things, and I realized that in a lot of cases, from the ones I can remember, it's the Europeans or Jewish people who are telling you that they are searching and finding these natives and finding these people or these communities, and somehow they are speaking Hebrew when they find the people. And then when you read some more, you find out that they somehow made contact with them before and so on. That doesn't necessarily mean that these natives weren't speaking Hebrew from a long time before, because when you read of the Bible saying the language of the Hebrews, or that history is telling you that the Hebrews were speaking Hebrew, well, that's not necessarily to be denied, because at some point they were speaking Hebrew, because they changed the language. Well, at some point they were speaking Aramaic. So that don't mean that Aramaic was necessarily their original tongue. So if Hebrews are speaking Hebrew and then you find some speaking Hebrew when you come to the Americas, that don't mean that Hebrew was their original tongue. You see what I'm trying to say? So yeah, you can find Decalogue stone and so on. That doesn't mean. But I find it kind of odd, though, to go on with this, that it says here on page 23 from this book, a singular incident illustrates the superstition of the age and the recency of the conversion of these people to Christianity. Because remember now, we're looking at, this was probably about 1008 AD, somewhere around there, when the Europeans come and they're finding these people here, right? They're telling you that the people weren't living by Christianity. So all these people who, from different sources and reports, are coming from Hebrews who either fled, revolted, or left, according to Apocrypha and other writings and reports, are leaving Assyrian captivity, and they're leaving, having fled from the land of Judah and so on, and from Masada, and coming over to the Americas, even to North and South America. They're coming over here to go, like the Apocrypha said, to a land where never man been before, something like that. And I don't know if it's first or second Esdras, somewhere there, to probably chapter 12 of the first or second Esdras. That's the number that comes to mind. I don't know if it's correct. I can't remember. To go to a land where never man dwelt before, to go and keep their laws unto their gods. But it seems like when the Europeans are finding them, they don't seem to be so interested in keeping the laws of their gods. And that's the problem. That is the part that's a problem for me. It seems like they're doing everything else, and so it seems that they're doing other worship systems and believing in other gods that to me look like gods from Africa and India. And we know that, you know. But look here, you're talking about Thor in this case. So he's saying the people are living by superstition, not the law of the Lord their God that they came here supposedly to worship some more, right? Properly. The god Thor. And so the people were dealing with Thor, and the Europeans introduced them to Christianity and pushed Christianity onto them, right? Even though they called them savages. I guess they were gonna make them much better people, no longer savages. I guess the moment that you might not be quote unquote civilized, but the moment you begin to worship Jesus, that takes away, it removes your savageness. You are no longer a savage just because you believe in Christ. But you are not a savage for having just seen a person and just started slaughtering them coming off your ship. So the god Thor, for the first and perhaps the last time, was worshipped in the Western Hemisphere. It happened in this wise. There sailed in the expedition, says the ancient narrative, one Thorhall, who later on I'm going to tell you that he was black or swarthy, but he's just saying here, commonly called the hunter, who had for many years been the huntsman of Iraq during the summer and his steward during the winter. This Thorhall was a man of gigantic stature and of great strength, and swarthy in complexion. He was a man of very few words, and when he did speak, it was chiefly in a railing way. To Iraq, he said, he had ever given evil counsel. Somehow, this black guy was working for this European for a while, so I guess whenever they found North and South America, somehow he got working for them. I don't know how. It doesn't tell the story. I don't know why. But he started working for them. But it's clear that he did not enjoy it for whatever reason he had to. But it's clear that he wasn't a slave either in the regular sense as we see the slaves on the plantations in shackles and so on. Because it looks like he was free to come and go. And he was a native of the land, and he had expert knowledge of the terrain. So that's why they were using him like this. So how would he have had expert knowledge if he wasn't a native and known the land that very well? Obviously they were using him, but he was free. But he gave them evil knowledge sometimes, letting you know that he didn't like them and that he thought they were imposters and they were invaders and so on. So he gave them evil knowledge whenever he could. But of course sometimes he obviously did help them out. So he gave them evil knowledge and of the uninhabited lands. So he didn't want them to really figure out the land very well. So he gave them evil knowledge so that they would more be limited to where they're at. The winter proving severe, the colonists endured much suffering from scarcity, and all their prayers appeared vain. So they were starting to starve now, and things were getting hard, right? So Thorhall, this black guy, wasn't going to tell them too easily where to find more food and so on. So he was just going to let them suffer and die. Right? So I don't know why he was working for them. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I don't know his story, so I'm going to have to look into it. But obviously, he wasn't having a good experience. So I don't know if they threatened him or because they were killing his people before, he decided to save his life to probably try and help them out. I don't know what the real deal is, but he wasn't helping them as well as he could have. Now it goes on to say that in this time when they were going through famine now in the winter and suffering, he disappeared on them. He just took off. Like he had given them even knowledge before, and now he just took off and disappeared at their worst time when they were in famine and going through scarcity, lack of food, and were suffering and in pain, and their God was not answering, and their God was Jesus, who was the son of Jehovah, who eventually we know in the Christian religion is the son is also called Jehovah sometimes. So he just disappeared on them because this black man didn't worship Christ, didn't worship Jesus, didn't worship Jehovah. He worshipped Thor, an ancient god of India, which was a god of the Africans, who the Africans started India as far as I've been able to uncover, because Kushites went into the land of India and started up civilization there from what I've uncovered so far. So this Thor, this ancient India and Africa god, is who these natives are worshipping in these parts, not Christ. So it's like, why are they not worshipping their God that they left the Assyrian Empire from and revolted to come and worship their God some more? Like, it just really kind of seems strange. Looks like they're more departed from it if that story is true in the Apocrypha. So he disappeared on them, and for 3 days fruitless search was made for him. On the morning of the 4th day proceeds the narrative. Thorfinn and Bjarne Grimolfsson, if I'm saying those names correctly, found him lying on the top of a rock. There he lay stretched out with his eyes open, blowing himself through his mouth and nose. So, it's, that's not a good sign. Like, I don't know if he was angry or what. With his eyes open and so on, mumbling somewhat to himself. They asked him why he had gone there. He answered that it was no business of theirs, that he was old enough to take care of himself without their troubling themselves with his affairs. So obviously it seems like maybe he just wasn't going through a good time, but obviously he didn't want to be around them either, so he took off. They asked him to return home with them, which he did. A short time after, a whale was cast ashore, and just to save time, I'll put this part in my own words. A whale was cast ashore, and because they were starving and hungry, and he wouldn't help them too much with the food from the land and showing them where more food was, the whale was cast ashore, a whale which they did not know before, which these Europeans didn't know before, but they took it and cut it up and cooked it and ate it. And it seems like the black guy didn't eat the whale. But they did, and it made them sick. And I'm not sure. I think it said that they started to get sick and die, but I know they got sick. They just the way ate all of it. They were taken ill immediately afterwards. And then now, so they got sick from eating the whale, right? Which, but now the black guy here now says to them, Thorhall, now you see that Thor is more ready to give aid than your Christ, because I guess he's going to help them out now, right? He's more ready to give aid than your Christ. This food is the reward of a hymn which I composed to Thor my God, not to Christ my God, if they fled here to worship their Hebrew God better and growing in this place. Which, when he started out this history book here, like I said, from 1856, he was talking about a lot of these nations here and these native peoples here. They're so old, so ancient, that it is from an immemorable time. You can't remember how far these people go back. You can't remember. Not much written documentation was left of them, and whatever little was there just wasn't popularized. But for the most part, they not much written history. Just a little bit, but from what little was found, you can tell, plus the artifacts and the remains that they left, it was very clear that the presence of these people were there, and it's clear showing up that they were blacks, as I'm going to show here as I keep reading this book and the other books that I've got that I found. but he mentioned that even though many of these civilizations, they just kind of disappeared, they just died out for some reason, they just disappeared. But more can be said about that later from other things that I've had people uncover as well. But he mentioned the two more great empires, which he called semi-civilized, he called them that, of Mexico and Peru. Those are the more prominent ones that he didn't mention. So you see, it's empires like this, of natives like this, that this Thorhold fits into. But his God was Thor, not Jehovah, not Yahweh, that they came here to worship more plainly, and not Christ, to worship this Christ, Thor. And so he decided now apparently to help them because they were dying, so he's going to help them to get well because they poisoned themselves by eating this whale that they didn't know before. Obviously, he probably knew the whale because he's indigenous, he knows the land, and he's not going to eat that. But he didn't tell them, he just let them eat it and so on. And he gave them evil advice before and so on. So they're killing themselves eating this stuff because they're starving. And now, notice now, he wasn't starving. So when he saw that they were starving, these intruders who called them savages and were killing them, he took off for days and they found him on the rock. Why? He realized that, look, we're all going to starve with, and famine is coming and the winter's coming. I'm not going to die with them. I'm going to go to the unmentioned lands that I didn't tell them about and go get food for myself and eat and stay by myself while they starve and die. I'm not going to tell them where the extra food is. And so he was fine, but they had to eat what they could find and ended up getting sick, nearly dying from it. And the hymn he made to his God, worshiping his God Thor, now he's going to give food because Thor blessed him for making his hymn to him, and he's giving him from the blessing of his God Thor. His God Thor has enabled him to bless the Christian people who were colonizing them and killing them because they were savages. And Thor is blessing the Christians, but the Jesus did not bless him. And he cursed out and put down this Jesus from Calvary. Because look what he says here. Now you see that Thor is more ready to give you aid than Christ. And like I said, Christ didn't help the Hebrews because he died in Calvary and didn't save them from the Romans killing them and so on. Even though he said, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. And he left them there and ascended to heaven, so-called, and let the Romans overpower his people, even though he said he had all power. So this food is given unto you from Thor, my God, who rarely forsakes me. Rarely forsakes me. So I say, my God Thor is better than your Jesus, than your Calvary Jesus that Hebrews are worshipping now, which is a great deception. This man here is going back to an ancient African God who is being worshipped by ancient Aboriginal, who I would just call original people in North and South America. From this American historian here in the 1800s, who's telling you that he's taking his stuff from facts and from manuscripts going way back to like 1,000 years before, up to even 500 years before Columbus, and he's telling you all this stuff. So when they came here, these people were not worshiping Jesus. And you say that they were black and they're Negro and they came here running from Assyrian and Babylon and persecution and so on. But when you find them here, you only hear that Decalogue stone and so on. But here I'm finding that that's not the full truth. They're worshiping other gods and they don't care about Christ. And so Christ was introduced, even with the Decalogue stone. I'm talking about Moses drawing an inscription and so on and drawing about Moses. It's not saying that they're finding the New Testament Beatitudes. It's finding Decalogue stone with 10 commandments. They're not worshiping Christ over here in America. When they're found, they're worshiping other gods. In this case, Thor. Not Jesus. They didn't flee and come over here worshiping Jesus. They didn't care about him. They were devoted, in this case, to Thor. So when they heard this, him talk about Thor and teach on Thor, they would not eat anymore. So they chose to receive the blessing of Thor. So imagine that. Now, are they backsliders? They're working for Jesus, they're serving Jesus, and they are pushing Jesus on the natives, but they are taking the blessing of Thor and eating the food consecrated unto Thor to save their lives. But Christians are going to tell you that you are savages and heathen, and that you are pagan. And Paul was teaching there, don't eat food sacrificed unto pagans, unto idols. But here it is, they are eating the food dedicated unto a pagan god, Thor. Because Jesus wasn't keeping them alive. And he couldn't even keep himself alive on Calvary. Something about this Jesus seems fake. That's why I've been teaching in the New Testament that the New Testament is fake. This Jesus is fake. His apostles are fake. And I already told you a long time ago that the Holy Ghost outpouring on the day of Pentecost, speaking in tongues, is fake. I showed that already. The whole thing is fake with the New Testament. So when they heard this, none would eat any more of the whale, the new whale that they never knew before, but obviously the natives knew it. And so they threw all the remainder of the flesh from the rocks, commending themselves to God. And then Thorhall helped them in the following year in 1008, sailing around different places and helping them make new discoveries and so on. And then they ended up discovering later on, resulting from his help, what is called, and I'll just close it out here, Mount Hope Bay today, which was by the Indian name, which was what it was called before Hop. And the lake itself to this day is called Mount Hope Bay, which was, I think, someplace by, where it said, Rhode Island, somewhere there. So anyway, so I just wanted to share that with you here, right? To show you that the Europeans were coming, bringing Christianity. Just like I said before, they brought Christianity to Uganda and different places in Africa with the video I showed you. The French were bringing Jesus, Vatican, bringing Jesus. Jesus is coming through the Vatican from Rome, Italy, the French, the British. What's the other country? Can't remember the other country, but still Europeans. So they come wherever they find these indigenous, they're bringing Jesus. Jesus is being spread by the Europeans, not by Hebrew Israelites. So the Hebrew Israelite teaching on this Christ of Calvary from the New Testament is fake. He's not the God of the Hebrews. He's the God of the Romans, which they stole from Africa, from ancient Egyptian religion. And they made up this Christ figure out of it. You got the whole Osiris stuff and so on. And the cross being ancient from Egypt. They made it all up and turned him white with the passing of time.